Pero vamos a recibir con un aplauso bien fuerte al doctor Silvio Torres Saillant.
El mensaje va dirigido a los jóvenes y, quieras o no, los jóvenes dominicanos en los Estados Unidos, para ellos, su principal lengua de aprendizaje, de comunicación y de entendimiento, su lengua intelectual es el inglés. Entonces arranco. Good evening. The President of the Dominican American, y también pensaba que cuando vamos a una actividad de gringos, les aceptamos el inglés a los gringos. Entonces, ¿por qué no se lo podemos aguantar también un compatriota? ¿Verdad? Good evening. The President of the Dominican American National Roundtable has done me the honor of asking me to address you on this majestic occasion with some words of exaltation prior to the screening of the Dominican List video, which will take place at the Hyatt as soon as we finish here. I believe Dr. Maria Teresa Montilla expects me to cheer you with a message of how great Dominicans are. Well, I'm afraid I might frustrate that expectation. You see, I don't think any of the peoples of the earth deserves to be called great wholesale. I believe only individuals can earn the rank of greatness. Populations, as collective entities, are usually complex collections of everything, including devils, saints, traitors, and heroes. Some years ago, at the University of Antioquia in Medellin, an Afro-Colombian colleague gave me an assessment of his people that has stayed with me for over 10 years. He said, in Colombia, the best you can find is the people. But the worst you can find is also the people. I can apply the same reasoning to my people and say, in my words, that Dominicans are just as bad as anybody else. They are not better than anybody else, but they're certainly not worse either. We should come to the defense of our people, our community, when we find them under siege, under attack, harassed by forces interested in depicting them wholesale as in a negative light, as if they were worse than anybody else and therefore deserved less respect. That is how I understand the issue of ethnic advocacy on behalf of Dominicans that I see the Dominican List engaging in. The Dominican List showcases an impressive array of individuals with extraordinary accomplishments and talents who have made enormous contributions in cities throughout the United States in areas ranging from education, law, health, politics, and sports to science, technology, and the arts. These individuals, mind you, represent only the tip of the Dominican iceberg. Many more have achieved outstanding feats in sites less reachable by the reporter's camera or the journalist's beat. They have re-energized neighborhoods which they found languishing. They have documented photographically the life of their community for 40 years, like Eduardo Hoberman has done. They have used their positions to advance the cause of justice, like Eduardo Paulino, a historian at Genjai College, has done, who is leading an effort to pay respects to the victims of the 1937 massacre on the border with Haiti. There is a website called Border of Light, inviting people to come to the border in October of this year to try to begin the healing process. They have taught the discipline of dance or athletics to youngsters after school, or used their ingenuity to create jobs when the country's economy did not provide them one, in street vending, sidewalk eateries, or artisanship, among others. The Dominican list, for the sake of experience, begins with those Dominicans whose stories are more accessible because their occupations have brought them into visibility. Still, one might ask what motive the Dominican American National Roundtable and the National Dominican American Council might have for compiling and publicizing such a distinguished gathering, a list of such a distinguished gathering of remarkable people of Dominican ancestry. Among the many plausible reasons that come to mind, one strikes me as the most likely, perhaps even the one subsuming all others. People of Dominican descent in this country must still continue to engage in ethnic advocacy. Many of you know the story of the Dominican Studies Institute. Ramona Hernandez is now the dynamic leader of that institution, which has brought us visibility nationally and has helped us correct the record regarding Dominicans in the United States. When we came into the picture, some of us who began at the City University of New York, we found books and articles written by people who are not Dominicans about Dominicans. And they focus on Dominicans as birds of passage, people who were here, who arrived the other day and who were just planning their return home, and who basically spent their talents and their time and their resources just shuttling back and forth between the Dominican Republic and the United States. And we decided that we were going to do all we could to try to document the Dominican experience of Dominicans, the experience of Dominicans in the United States as a community, as an ethnic subsection of the American population. Our research revealed a story of Dominican presence in the United States that went back many more decades than scholars had accounted for. We took note of Dominicans settling in this land after the 1850s. The renowned Pedro Enriquez Ureña Diógenes, whom you mentioned, who arrived in New York City in 1901, spoke of the many Dominicans he found living in the building near Columbia University where he first made his residence. The wall of the U.S. Pavilion's theater during the 1939 World's Fair featured art by Francisco Rebajes, an artist who in 1922, at age 16, had arrived from Puerto Plata and settled in New York, where he became one of the first craftsmen jewelers in the city's Greenwich Village community before establishing a nationwide chain of stores with company headquarters on Fifth Avenue. The indefatigable educator Marie-Elie Peña Gratero has long promoted the story of the role of Dominican women and men in the workforce that fueled the prestigious Madame Alexander's Dog Company from the 1950s onward. The incomparable performance artist, poet, and teacher Josefina Baez years ago designed an exhibition called Dominicanas Dominicosas that included black and white photographs depicting family scenes of Dominicans in New York during the late 1930s. That was also the time when Rina P. Espaillat made New York City her home. At age 7, she relocated with her family from Washington, D.C., where they had been living before. As a student in New York City public schools, she excelled in English, astonishing her teachers with her poetic compositions in this newly acquired language. A teacher took the liberty of sending Rina's poems out to publishers, and by 1947, with publications to her credit, she had become an upcoming literary star. At the tender age of 16, she was inducted into the Poetry Society of America as the youngest poet ever to have received the honor. A superior American poet, the author of many award-winning poetry books, Rina today remains jovial and genial, enjoying the respect of poets and readers nationwide, including many in the New Formalist movement, who view her as a guiding light. I had the good fortune of attending a conference in Pennsylvania where the New Formalists met. These are basically writers, poets who believe in traditional English prosody, in the traditional poetic forms, as tools that are still valid in poetry. And they actually think of Rina as a kind of godmother, an inspiration. And it was wonderful to see, as we say in Dominican parlance, toda esta gente con ojos azules rindiéndole honor a nuestra compatriota. These examples show that Dominicans have grown deep roots in this North American land, roots which become even deeper with the story made public in 2010 by Dr. Ramona Hernandez, the dynamic director of the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute, and Associate Director Anthony Stevens Acevedo. I refer here to the story of Juan Rodriguez, who arrived in New York as he arrived on a Dutch ship from Santo Domingo in 1613 and decided to stay, becoming the very first non-Native American settler of the area. And of course, what can we not say about what happened recently in New York, in the battle for the control of Congressional District number 13, where this Dominican American went against an institution in American politics, an institution because he had been on the job for 42 years, an institution because he had the New York Times and the entire press establishment on his side, an institution because he had the entire Democratic Party machine on his side, and he had public opinion and even some of the Latino establishment on his side. And this Dominican American went head to head with the man. Not only that, as the news coverage of the election shows, this incumbent Congressman Charles Rangel even had the Board of Election on his side, as details have shown. Yeah? And in addition to that, this institution campaigned vigorously in a way that he had never had to compete for his job since any time before in the 42 years that he has been there. And still, his advantage over this Dominican American newcomer was less than 1,000 votes. Less than 1,000. And I regard that as a humongous victory for the Dominican community. Yeah? And I argue that a person from a community that just got off the boat, yeah? A person from a community that is only thinking about politics in the Dominican Republic, right? A person from a community without roots in this country would not be able to achieve that feat that this Dominican, New York State Senator achieved, yeah? I believe that is that historical memory of Dominicans in the United States that made that triumph possible, yeah? And so, Dominicans in the United States, well, you also heard the good words of Angelo Falcon, the director of the Latino Policy Institute, who has made it very clear that basically what the significance of this outcome is, right? In his words, now, he says, and I quote, "After this, politicians will not take the Dominican community for granted ever again." Dominicans in the United States, as the contest for New York's 13th Congressional District illustrates, have already done much to assert themselves in the land. The case shows that the political status quo, which has long chosen to regard Dominicans as a recent population in this country, as one lacking a large enough pool of voters, as one whose members harbor political thought only in relation to their ancestral homeland, and as a population without the necessary seniority to demand a share of power will find it very hard to continue to get away with that story. Dominicans have simply become too difficult to dismiss. The political establishment will have to come to terms with the reality of the deep roots that Dominicans have grown in this country, too deep indeed for them to forego the role that they could play in helping design public policy and contribute to shaping the future of the cities, the states, and the society where they live. As these images have shown, and as we learned about the backgrounds of these individuals, it is clear that these are people committed to shaping this country. They're not just passive recipients of what other leaders do. They want to partake of the job of leadership. The Dominican list perhaps is a way of saying that we are here, that we have long been here. Dominicans want what all other segments of the US population want, to have their presence seen, acknowledged, and respected, while being allowed to be themselves, and as such, to thrive materially and spiritually. As a bona fide ethnic group of this country's population, they also want to be liberated from the narrative that continues to view them as if they were an issue of foreign affairs. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, doctor.